Well, good morning. Good morning. This is Roger A. Watson with another series from Man Up, Man Anointed, Networking with Understanding and Purpose. We've been talking about permanence versus temporaries here on Saturday mornings, and we do have some videos to upload from last week. We started dealing with the takeaways. Excuse me. The takeaways are from my book, Agaphileros C, the third book. I have Agaphileros A, B, and C. C is 8 movements to the love of a lifetime. And we did a movement called Permanence versus Temporaries. So what we're doing, now that we've finished going through that movement, at the end of every movement, we have what is called takeaways. So takeaways are little snippets of what we wrote about. And so we're going to jump from the takeaways and kind of enhance what was discussed. So last week, we only got through one takeaway. This week, I'm trying to get through 4 in the 3 10-minute sessions. So we prayed already, so we're going to jump right in. And just by way of review, we're going to review what permanent is and temporary is also. So when we talk about a permanent, and today we are going to focus on relationships between men and women, husbands and wives. That has really been a passion of mine, even when the Lord spoke to me in 2012 and told me to go teach others. He told me to teach others about the life and the love that Jessie, my first wife, and I had before she passed. And she truly was a permanent. And so a permanent is someone or something provided by God that will be there as long as God intended, doing and being what God intended. It's someone or something that helps you to get into and stay in and to complete your God-given purpose. It's someone or something that aids God's good, acceptable, and perfect will for your life. So that's a permanent. You're talking about a man and a woman. A permanent is a husband that remains a good husbandman. A permanent is a wife that remains that good woman, that good wife that takes care of a home, a virtuous woman like Proverbs 31:10 through 31 talks about, that type of a woman. And when I think about scriptures and I think about permanent man or temporary man, the two that kind of jumps out, one of them I discussed last week as a temporary. His name was Amnon. Now Amnon, one of David's sons, raped his half-sister Tamar, and I went over that prior. And because of that, that temporary situation, you have lust, you have deception, you have hurt, you have rape, you have murder, you have war. You have all of that stemming from the actions of a temporary. And in the world we live in today, a lot of what's going on that has been spurred by temporaries result in all of these things. We have lust, we have rape, we have crime, we have murder, we have incarceration, we have funerals, we have all of these because we have temporary people walking around on the earth involving or creating situations with other people that are causing friction, that are causing all of this pain and hurt. And one of my jobs is to teach. And so I'm trying to teach you that being a permanent is so far better than being a temporary. Yes, we have the ability as permanent people to become temporary. You can be a permanent person, a good husband, a good wife, and easily become distracted and become a temporary or temporary-minded person. And when you do that, you make temporary decisions that have consequences, which is the things that happen every day, So even the court system, I was aware of someone that was going through a divorce, and they were saying that the judge was trying to encourage them to stay together, and the person mentioned, black love, staying together, and the person was like, bump black love. What has gone on in my marriage is ripping me apart, even trying to destroy my life. And I'm fearful for my life now because this permanent person has now begun to think and operate temporarily. And I'm telling you, my friends, men, women, if you are a permanent, if you are somebody that God has anointed to help other people attain and obtain their purpose, do not switch to temporary thoughts. Do not switch to temporary thinking. We're going to look at at a temporary thinker and a permanent thinker in the book of Proverbs today as well. We're going to look at that a little bit later. But we want to make sure that you understand a temporary person like Amnon brings hurt, pain, misery, disaster. He even lost his life over this matter of being a temporary. Now, we also have the example of Boaz, the permanent. And when you hear women in the church talk about they're waiting on their Boaz, they're waiting to find their Boaz. They're praying for God for their Boaz to find them, you know. Well, Boaz was a permanent. And Boaz found another permanent. Sometimes the reason you don't have your Boaz, that permanent that you're looking for, is because you have not proceeded to become a permanent yourself. Because when you're single is when you become a permanent, so that you attract a permanent. And that when you're a permanent, you can make good choices about the people that you let into your life. Now, some people, they're temporaries, but they want a permanent. No, you have to become a permanent thinker. You have to understand purpose. You have to understand your destination. You have to understand the call of God on your life. And then you can attract a permanent. Amen. All right. So we talked about who is a permanent. We talked about what a permanent is, what they do. And we also want you to understand that we're all going to make mistakes in life. All permanents are going to make mistakes. Well, temporaries kind of live in mistakes, but permanents, every now and then we can slip into mistakes. We make mistakes. But you have to be careful as a permanent that you're not stuck in that mistake. You're not stuck in, the mistake could be a temporary minded mistake. You can slip up. And we'll talk about that even more later on. Bear this in mind. God forgives, but people don't forget. God forgives, but people do not forget. So make sure as a permanent you keep your mind stayed on your destination. Keep it stayed on your purpose. Keep it stayed on God and His Word. And you can progress along the path of a permanent. So we're going to talk about man, woman, relationships, marriages today, husbands, wives, that kind of stuff. So we're gonna read. I'm gonna try to get through these 4. I'm just gonna read them all 4 just to say I read them. You know. All right. So I don't normally number takeaways. Maybe going forward I'll start to number them. But if you have Agaphileros C, my 3rd book, I have A, B, and C on Amazon, and you can contact me directly for it. 8 movements to the love of a lifetime. Movement 2 deals with the permanent versus the temporary. Okay. Now, the second takeaway that I have in there, it says this: never give up a permanent person for a temporary person. Never give up a permanent person for a temporary person. This is a common mistake made by people who are immature and unstable in relationships. You can be a permanent that becomes unstable and immature if you don't maintain the mind of a permanent. It begins in the mind. It begins in how you take in information, how you process that information, and what you allow into your heart, because that's going to set your attitude or your disposition. And once that is set, it determines what desires you have, and the desires you have will result in the actions. That's T-A-D-A. Ta-da! So make sure that you maintain the thought processes for a permanent, okay? Because if you do not, you very well might enter into the temporary mindset. Now, the takeaway number 9, I kind of numbered them so I can keep up with them, and you can do so in your book as well. When you say yes to who is temporary, you say no to who is a permanent. Now, imagine Ruth in the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. Having Boaz there, but deciding, well, Boaz is older than me, I'm going to go with a young fella. Because Boaz noted that. He said, she's not running after the young men. She's keeping herself. She is preserving herself. That's an indication that he noticed that woman is a permanent, So imagine if Ruth had gone over to one of the young fellas because he's a young fella. Now, the young fellas were working for Boaz. Now, imagine her going with one of them. She would not be in the lineage of Christ. She would not be in the lineage of King David. Some other person would have been. Boaz would have married someone else, another permanent. But because Ruth was a permanent and she kept on purpose and stayed focused on what her mother-in-law Naomi had told her, She kept doing the needful things. God allowed Boaz and Ruth to hook up. So don't settle for a temporary. And please don't marry a temporary, because if you marry a temporary, you are inviting a heartache, misery, and sorrow into your marriage. Matter of fact, some of you are married to temporaries right now, and you know what I'm talking about. You have to pray that that temporary husband or wife gets converted and become a permanent thinker, because if not, you're going to live in misery. You wouldn't even want to come home from work. And some people go to work and they really don't want to come home. And they tell you, they'll let you know, I don't want to go home. It's just misery. As soon as we go home, there's going to be an argument. There's going to be a fight. There's going to be abuse and all type of things. This is what people are living with. So when you say yes to who is temporary, you say no to who is permanent. So we're going to stop this video here because we're almost at 11 minutes, and we'll start part 2 shortly. Okay, thank you.